if anybody has a problem, I'll turn off the recording before questions at the end. We thought questions at the end, but if anybody has a burning issue, I think do jump in, because we're a relatively tight group. So I'll pass over to Simon.
Fab, thank you, Caroline. Wicked. All right, just going to minimize the faces screen just so I can see my notes and stuff. So
actually, everybody should turn their cameras off because you'll be in the recording, actually.
All right, yeah.
If you don't want to be.
Great. Yeah, so I'm just going to turn my minimize the faces. So if my connection wavers at any point and you can't hear me, do shout back, because otherwise I'll be sort of shouting into the void for a change. Lovely. All right. So thank you ever so much for introduction, Caroline. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. My name's Simon. Here to talk about Gillian Tett's fantastic book, Anthro Vision, today. When I read it, it's made a really good, really deep impression on me, and so hence it came up in conversation for me to do one of these sessions. So that's where I'm coming from today. It's something that's made an impression on me. I'm just trying to convey my own personal impressions, really. Just wanted to point out, so I know we've got people from lots of varied backgrounds on the call. So I'm a researcher, qualitative researcher. I'm not an anthropologist or an ethnographer by trade. So I guess there's other people who are attending who might have studied anthropology for 4 years and gone out to do 12 or 18 months of participant observation in glamorous or less glamorous places. So their views or impressions of the book might be slightly different to mine. So that'd be really interesting to discuss towards the back end. So onto the book. So in terms of what I'm going to talk about today and why I've picked it, I wanted to start more broadly in terms of the big picture about, why this book, or why talk about any particular book, or why write a blog post about a particular book, or why mention it in conversation. I thought that was just an interesting point to kind of start off with. And this is the sort of process that sort of goes through my mind when I'm, because I read far more books than I might sort of talk to people about or write about. It comes down to Philip Larkin. So Larkin is you might be familiar with him or not, but he was an author, and he chaired the Booker Prize judging panel in the 70s. And he talked about sort of 4 tests, if you like, about a sort of work of fiction in this case, sort of making an impression on you. And I think these are sort of, I feel sort of a certain resonance of them. So could I read it? Did I believe it? If I believed it, did I care about it? And if I did care about it, what was the quality of that caring, and would it last? So I think, I suppose we all have a different lens, but a book that really sort of alters your worldview somewhat, sort of would get into the sort of that sort of criteria of impression making. I think certainly this book sort of did for me. I'm going to move on to a very tortured analogy now. So apologies for anybody of you who didn't grow up in the 1980s or 70s and aren't familiar with the happy days years. But from why are we interested in anthropology? Because the majority of us are sort of commercial research, turning around projects in 3 or 4 weeks. And certainly from my outsider's point of view, in the world of insight, the anthropologists are the sort of the cool kids in the room. They're the ones with the upturned leather jackets, voyaging into the unknown, embedding themselves into the world they're researching. They're using their personal judgment to inform their work as much as their sort of training and the rules of engagement. And to me, there's something sort of enigmatic about their practice. So in this very tortured analogy, us researchers are little Richie Cunningham in our checkered cardigan looking on, and the anthropologists are the cool dudes surfacing insights like soda bottles out of the soda machine there. So that's my perspective. For anything that shines a light onto the anthropologist or ethnographer's practice is readily appreciated, and that's how I really approach this book. So in terms of Anthro Vision then, so what it's all about, it's all about demystifying the enigmatic world of anthropology and its main method, ethnography. Gillan Tett is executive editor at the Financial Times. So she started out as an anthropologist before a twist of fate brought her into journalism. And she's probably best known for being one of the few commentators who foresaw the 2008 global financial crisis. And the question always returns to why her? So why did she see it? in her words, she relies on Anthro Vision. So using an intellectual framework derived from anthropology that enables you to see around corners, spot what is hidden in plain sight, and gain empathy for others, and to gain fresh insight into problems. So really, for me, what part of the reason it made such an impression is that it's really highly readable, that she's a brilliant writer. It's just the words spring off the page, great storyteller. She's more concerned with storytelling than sort of navel-gazing epistemology arguments. So she returns again and again to lots of examples about how this analytical lens leads to new insight. So really relevant, not just for researchers, but for all decision makers. So I'm going to talk about themes, really. Sorry, has anybody got a question, or is that, shall I continue? Got a couple of things in the chat. Oh, we've got some questions here. Yeah, I live at cardigans too. I'm just looking at the chat. I used to have a collection of grey cardigans. I think I had 4 very similar ones. So I'm an absolute massive fan, but we'll return to that at the end. So I'm going to fire on into themes. So I won't read this quote out. I'll allow you to read it yourself. But Tett wrote the book in last year, so 2021. And so she was reflecting on the global financial crisis of 2008, Brexit, Trump, COVID, all these different things. And I think there's a general theme here of the vast resources of organizations and businesses and government. It's so really quite surprising how often we're caught wrong-footed. And if you stop to reflect on the resources available to a huge company or the state, it's you know all the people, all the different brains, all the different models, all the different ways of thinking. It brings you up short, really. And the quote really gets to the center of this. So the models of decision making are incomplete, and they're incomplete because they lack human understanding. So, and I see this in my daily work. We work with a very famous online retailer, and they're drowning in data. They've got more data than they know what to do with. The models, they help, but they don't quite get them to a decision. They don't inspire action, and they're often slightly floundering and looking for human understanding. So I'll push on into another tortured analogy here, a bit of a crap analogy here. So this is the Arby's Meat Mountain Burger. It's 2,500 calories of glory. You can see all the different elements stacked up there, the fried chicken, the pastrami, the different cheeses there. It's a piece of wonder, but when you get it out of the box, it's very different. And this is how I like to think about models and models of decision making. So model-based decision making is really limited to the assumptions that we put into them. Big data is great, but essentially looking for a needle in a bigger haystack. And not all models fit all situations. So really, you need human judgment to elevate decision making. And so I'll repeat in terms of a quote from the book: an awareness of culture and context, a humility that the world cannot be neatly bounded or captured by a single set of parameters. The analogy that Tett uses in her book is slightly different, perhaps more sophisticated and more clear. So analytical tools that ignore context really are very limited. And her argument is that we should use lots of different models in combination. So her analogy is, here, I'll read this out for you. So trying to navigate the 21st century world only using the tools developed in the 20th century, such as economic models, is like walking through a dark wood with a compass at night and only looking down at the dial. Your compass may be technically brilliant and tell you where to aim, but if you only focus on the compass dial, you will walk into a tree. Tunnel vision is deadly. We need lateral vision, and that's what anthropology can impart, Anthro Vision. So that's her sort of main argument. So in terms of core principles, and if anybody's interested, I can share the slides, so you don't need to write all these down or whatever. So principles are pretty intuitive here. So familiar to any researcher, we're shaped by our environment. So what's normal to me isn't maybe normal to you. You really need to spend time with people to understand your mindsets. And then in so doing, you're going to gain sight into your own world. You're going to sort of check your own lens somewhat. A bit more specific to anthropology, but daily habits are shaped by rituals and symbols. And these can be a real shortcut to understanding once you sort of hone your craft, as is being on the lookout for what people aren't talking about, the things that are perhaps the elephant in the room. So she terms this social silence. And the overall theme is that trying to draw big conclusions from individual observations. So going from the micro level to draw macro level conclusions. So for me, already I'm feeling slightly emboldened because I'm reading her text. I'm going, oh, actually, you know, these cool dudes who have this enigmatic practice are actually, there's a sort of a scaffolding of process and a way of looking at the world, which as a researcher, I'm sort of engaging with already to a certain degree. So I'm already feeling a bit positive by this stage in the book. So I'm going to give an example. So as I mentioned at the start, so Tett was one of the few commentators who predicted the 2008 financial crisis. And really the question is how? So she describes this in detail in her book. She embedded herself with bankers, you know, going to conferences, spending time with them, interviewing them, getting to know all their different acronyms of credit default swaps and collateralized debts, obligations, PowerPoints, or even the Bloomberg terminals that they spend all the time with trading. She talks about them creating a shared mental map that didn't represent reality. So again, I'll come to a quote here. So precisely because the financiers were such a close-knit intellectual tribe with little external scrutiny, they could not see whether their creations were spinning out of control. And because they had such a strong creation myth about the benefits around innovation, they were averting their eyes from risks. So we all know how it ended, but they couldn't see the wood for the trees. Tett specifically refers here to what she terms social silence, so what they were not talking about. And this way of thinking, so looking from the outside, as I mentioned in the previous slide, looking at the rituals and symbols and the way they operated, thinking about what they weren't talking about, that led her first to question, then to explore, and then to hypothesize about what problems might exist in the world of subprime mortgages. So it was really her training that sort of led her to start, I suppose, following the trail and build a case bottom up. So some of you might be familiar with the film The Big Short. You might have seen it, you may not have done. So again, this is sort of dramatized in the film, this sort of building up a bottom up picture. So she terms it like looking at the world with a worm's eye view, not a bird's eye view. So understanding the micro level to draw macro level conclusions. And that's core to anthropology. So this is dramatized in the film The Big Short. So anybody who's seen it, you might remember a scene where I think it's Steve Carell's character is in Florida investigating the subprime issue, and he goes to a lap dancing club and is talking to a pole dancer who's taken out multiple mortgages that she could not possibly repay because she didn't have a steady income. And that experience of seeing and hearing and talking to a living, breathing human who's at the end of the financial chain really put the light bulb on for this character in the movie. So it wasn't a bird's eye view of PowerPoints and Bloomberg terminals and credit default swaps and acronyms and stuff. It was the absolute polar opposite. It was the worm's eye view. It was the bottom up view of the anthropologist, which should be music to all researchers' ears. So the analogy, the image to stick with you is to leave you with here is the worm's eye view, looking from the bottom upwards, from the top down, trying to understand the micro level in order to understand macro level conclusions. Now, there are loads of examples in the book, and they're told in a far more compelling way than I can do here. But I'll just leave you with another one here. So very, very different. So this is the Ebola crisis. I think it's Sierra Leone around 2013, 14. Just such a different context, but applying the same sort of lenses and tools really here is sort of thought was useful to discuss. So the World Health Organization assumed that information would be the solution to the Ebola crisis across all different cultures. So simply tell people what the risks are and the right actions will follow. Sierra Leone, however, this failed. So it failed because it ignored culture. Apparently in the local belief system, when someone dies, friends and family need to pay their respects by participating in a funeral with the body present. So if you don't do that, if you have a funeral without the body present, the deceased is consigned to a permanent hell, and that everybody else within the village or community would suffer. And that's part of the local belief system. So only the body dies from Ebola, but an Ebola burial kills the spirits. That was the local belief system there. So what the World Health Organization did when they realized that the solutions weren't working and that the crisis was persisting, they consulted anthropologists. They understood the cultural context, and they made various different suggestions to the implementation of the solutions. So firstly, using village elders as messengers, so making sure the right people to spread the message. Secondly, making the treatment process transparent, so putting treatment centres in villages rather than taking people away to other places, and in some cases even having treatment tents with transparent plastic as opposed to being shut away. And then lastly, devising funeral rituals that were safe both in medical terms but also in social terms, and allowing the flexibility of the local context. So ultimately what they were trying to do here was understand the local cultural context and then amend the solutions, the health solutions there, in order to make sure that the disease wasn't spread. And that was ultimately what was effective. So again, a really interesting example from my perspective. So talked a little bit about the principles, and I wanted to just kind of sort of a light on a few sort of elements we can take into our daily practice, really. So the obvious thing for us all is that we can all embrace these principles, and really what we're trying to do here is look at our own worlds with fresh eyes, to, I suppose, adjust our lens slightly and see the collective beliefs that sit between us. And there's a lovely quote there from Anais Nin. So what we're familiar with, we cease to see. So trying to sort of have that insider outsider mindset is incredibly important. We're all aware of these things, but it's about amping them up and being more confident. The other thing about, is, if you're just a qualitative researcher, just a researcher, not an ethnographer, or not an anthropologist, I think we could maybe have permission to take the chip off the shoulder and just relax a bit. So there's a great quote in the book talking about how studies were shallow by academic standards, and academics might spend 12 or 18 months embedded as a participant observer for a PhD thesis or something like that. A commercial organisation who just do ethnography, like Strike Partners, they might spend like 2 days embedded with somebody as part of a commercial project. Other organisations might do shorter, like a day. But what even in commercial market research, a lot of us just end up having a portion of time which is just for observation and built into a project. And what some of us do is more ethnographic than proper ethnography due to time and budget constraints. But really, the message from me, I suppose, is that's okay, and that's the message that sort of chimes with the book. What we're trying to do with observation is explore subjective experience of other people, and exploring, I suppose, the given context which we're interested in as well. It's exploratory, it's exploring an unknown unknowns, being centered around the participant and going where they go and doing what they do. So all of these things unlock meaning in surprising ways, which are far more sort of close to reality than other means of market research, retrospective recall, etc. So the fact that you're doing at least something elevates your project to a certain extent, and we can all relax a bit. So commercial researchers can relax a bit, I think. The balance here between the hard realities of client needs and timings of budgets sort of sometimes mean that we can sometimes we feel guilty about not being able to do things the proper way, but certainly when Tett talks about what she does in the real world, it's often very different from an 18-month ethnography. She often talks about the second one here. So she'll go off and interview somebody, but just leave a bit of time at the end of the interview to have a bit of unstructured open-end discussion at the end. So that's the base level for her, applying her the anthropological modes of thinking and ways of analysis, and then taking her data as just like a bit of snatched conversation at the end of an interview at the bare minimum. The other things that she talks about within in the book in terms of a toolkit, obviously there's the one we're familiar with is unstructured observation as best you can, but also 3 and 4 here are examples of creative ways to shoehorn in some kind of exploratory task-based analysis. So allowing people a bit of time with a blank sheet of paper, literally to draw out their world and how the different elements fit together. or sort of more visually, using diaries and collages to allow people to sort of illustrate what concepts or issues mean to them, and it's really undirected on their own terms, really. So she's very pragmatic. She's a pragmatist, not a purist. And for me, I was like, oh gosh, I'm feeling a bit more confidence now. I'm feeling a bit more fond the more this book goes on. So fantastic. Ditch the guilt. Be a pragmatist, not a purist. And just taking this into a summary, really. So what you can do, really, adjust your mindset and see more opportunities. So the greater theme is being open. It's about widening your lens. It's about allowing room for the unexpected and space to rethink what you know. That developing that what she terms the insider-outsider perspective, and sort of asking them questions, but also bringing in different disciplines as well. So I think really in summary, researchers can relax a bit and harness their inner funds. The ethnographers can maybe be a bit more data-led and take in other data sources. Maybe data people can be a bit more led by human understanding. And I think what it says to me is, as well, the spirit of the book is that our joint endeavour as researchers, like whatever your specialism really is, understanding. And you've got permission to draw on as much as you can to get there. You shouldn't apologise. You should just feel emboldened. So I want to finish on a lovely quote, and I might read this one out. So Anthro Vision should not replace other intellectual tools, but complement them. So just as adding salt to food binds the ingredients and enhances the flavour, adding anthropological ideas to disciplines such as blah, blah, blah creates a deeper and richer analysis. So in conclusion, cultivate that insider-outsider perspective, have the confidence to give things a go, and have the bravery to acknowledge that the human reality of the context is what drives that behaviour. So get that worm's eye view. And that was pretty much it. So I'm happy to bring it onto the conversation part now. So like I say, some of you might agree or disagree. Some of you might be approaching this from a different angle. And I can see we've got some different comments in the chat, which I'm going to read now. So yeah, so do people want to come in now? Caroline, do you want to come back in?
If you stop sharing, I'll stop the recording.
Wicked.
That, and then we can open it up. And with huge thanks, I thought that was fantastic.
Cool.